Hi, everyone. Welcome to this year's TEDx event at Wake Forest University. I'm your MC, Daniel Sexton, and I gotta say I'm excited because our speakers are gonna take us around the world and back. We're gonna laugh, we're gonna rap, and I might as well go ahead and tell you we're gonna cry. But before we do, quick reminder, please, no food or drinks, please silence your cell phones, and please, no flash photography. Now, you're going to be hearing a ton from us today, but we want to hear from you too. So make sure to tweet out the hashtag TEDxWakeForestU, and you'll see your thoughts up here. Now, I get the feeling that some of you have to be new to the idea of a TEDx event. So to tell you more about that, please help me welcome Ms. Polly Black. Our theme today is security. And we live in a world where technology is advancing so rapidly that our most valuable information online may be at more risk than ever before. Our next speaker has worked in the technology industry for over 30 years. Forbes, Fortune, name a business magazine, and I guarantee you he has been featured in it. He's the CEO of Oracle, the IT giant responsible for keeping the information secure between our nation's biggest players and their clients. To tell you how this works, please help me welcome Mark Hurd. All right. Mr. Hurd, let's get real for a second. This is the only time I'm ever going to get you and my dad in the same room, and he still won't let me.
Where's your dad?
Right there. He still won't let me have online banking. So what I'm wondering is America ready to put our most valuable information on the internet and truly feel secure about it?
It's a great question. Listen, I think that, like I said earlier, this is all going to get more and more secure. Almost assuredly. Where's your dad? I want to make sure you know, almost assuredly, companies will do a better job protecting your data than you will. The obsession, if you're running Chase, Wells, Citi, B of A, any of these banks, you are obsessed with security. It is an absolute obsession. Now, the more security we apply, patches, the encryption levels that I've described, I think you give this a little bit more time, and the ability to penetrate is really difficult. I'll never say never, because believe me, the bad guys improvise. There's a lot of money in being a bad guy. So therefore, the bad guys will continue to attract talent. I am very confident, though, in our ability, particularly in the corporate world, to stay ahead of the bad guy. And as long as we continue to get conformance on the part of companies to make sure they apply the appropriate technologies, I think you should feel safe. I always say this. Let me make sure I explain it to you this way. I always tell customers, almost assuredly, your data is more safe with me than it is in your data center, because I apply everything. I encrypt everything. Now, is your data more safe in your PC or in a big bank's banking system? Almost assuredly in a big bank's banking system, because they will apply far more sophistication and security than you could at the personal level. I'd much more worry about what you click on and what you post, because the ability to get at your personal information more than likely is going to come by somebody coming at you personally.
Well, great. I think we all feel safe in your hands. Thanks, Mr. Hurd.
Thank you all. Bye.
So you can all probably tell that Mark Hurd has had more success in his life than anyone could pretty much ever hope to. But our next speaker has spent most of her life fighting for those who haven't had the same opportunity. And this hits close to home for us at Wake Forest. That's the security of a sound education. With cuts to funding came cuts to arts programs all around the country. But our next speaker thinks the arts are exactly what we need to bridge this education gap in America. To tell you how, please help me welcome Katrina Peru. Thanks, Katrina. Well deserved. So I was listening to you talk, and I was thinking, all right, we've got these kids in this program. Awesome. How are we going to keep them there?
Well, I mentioned it a little bit earlier that retention is one of the toughest things when it comes to working with high school students. There was a point in the school year where the attendance did drop off a little bit, And normally what we would do in working in after school is we'll go recruit more kids or different kids. But in this particular situation, instead of finding new kids, I said, no, let's go back and find the kids who dropped out and find out why they dropped out. And in finding out why they dropped out, I would have never guessed in a million years, their why. The principal brought them back in a room for another focus group, and they told me the reason why they dropped out is because the Christmas show was coming up, and they were afraid to perform. They felt that that their peers were going to laugh at them. So they were stuck in that self-esteem part of the pyramid, and all they needed was a push and a boost and a cheerleader to let them know that everything was going to be okay. And they ended up performing, and they had a great time, and then the attendance picked back up again. So you have to be persistent, and you have to keep at it, and talk to them. Constant communication, because they will always tell you what's wrong.
Well, thankfully they have that cheerleader, and that's you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So from technology to education, our last two speakers gave us insight into two multi-billion-dollar industries. Business people and educators are expected to play by the rules. But there's an underground illegal industry worth over $150 billion a year, and it's hidden right under our noses in plain sight. Look at the number of people in here today. The number of people who are victimized by human trafficking every single day would overflow this chapel. Our next speaker has spent most of his life working with the Polaris Project, named after the Underground Railroad, to fight this modern-day form of slavery and to ensure these victims the security of their personal freedom. Because of that, it's a huge pleasure to introduce one of the conductors of this modern-day Underground Railroad, Bradley Miles. So we just imagined everything you told us to imagine, and I got to say it sounds pretty good. But we can't do it alone, and I understand that you guys are making a lot of partnerships. A lot of this happens in hotels. Is there a way to team up with hotels and make sure that we're getting on the better end of this?
So we began to realize that there are so many different good companies that bad actors are trying to infiltrate or trying to use. And one of those is hotels, where a pimp might try to use a hotel room to sell girls. And so we have begun to reach out and thought, who are all the different companies that we need to equip to understand how to identify, prevent, respond to trafficking? Maybe Facebook, maybe banks, maybe hotels, maybe others, right? And so we've reached out and partnered with Wyndham Hotels, Hilton, Hyatt, Carlson, some of the major hotel chains around the world, to say you could train your workers, you could train your front desk staff, you could publicize the hotline number, you could be thinking about the labor side too. Some of the hotel housekeepers, there's been cases where the hotel housekeepers were actually enslaved. So how could you work on the labor side and the sex side and actually make sure that that hotel is a slavery-proof environment? So there's major partners that to get this done, we have to partner with certain industries, and one of the industries is the travel and tourism industry.
Sounds like we're off to a good start. Thanks, Mr. Miles.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're about to go to a short break. We're going to break for 20 minutes, and then we're going to get back to some more just amazing talks. I've heard them all. Trust me. They're not paying this to say this. They're all awesome. You got to stick around. But if you look up here, we're going to have a link to an interactive map that we have, and it's going to show you where at Wake Forest on the quad you're going to be able to find the bathroom or the bite to eat that you've been looking for. So we're going to throw that up here. Yep, I think that's it right there. And you can pull it up on your phone. It's totally interactive. And take advantage of that. We'll see you at 1:40. So one of the challenges facing the children that Katrina spoke about is the challenge of knowing that when you get home, there's going to be a meal on your plate. And I'm sure we've all donated a can or two to a food drive, but our next speaker says that we've got to take it a step further. She's based here in North Carolina, but her work has the power to change lives anywhere in the country when someone goes hungry. And I don't know if you all know this, but Winston-Salem is one of the biggest food deserts in the country, so to us, this really means a lot. Get ready for some food for thought from Miss Maureen Berner. So, Ms. Berner, to me, this just seems like a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
And it's in Durham, and it's happening in North Carolina. Why isn't it happening everywhere?
Because, I want to approach it from the idea not to get tied up in the politics or the philosophy, but saying this is an established program and it's not running efficiently and effectively. Business, and when we look at things in a different way, oftentimes how business does, they say, how can I make this more efficient and effective? And I think that's the sort of philosophy we need to go at with this. And the problem is becoming so large that if we don't deal with it, we're going to pay for it down the road. I mean, we don't use volunteers to pave our roads, right? We don't try to have volunteers change the light bulbs in the street lamps. Why do we rely upon this program's, the summer meals program has been around 50 years. Why are we running it in the same way? We need new ideas.
Well, it's exciting that North Carolina is leading by example in this, and hopefully the rest of the nation will follow. Thanks, Ms. Berner.
Thank you.
So you often hear people say, I remember where I was when the Twin Towers fell. And it's hard to believe that even though that was almost a decade and a half ago, it still feels like it was yesterday. And I think that's because when something hits our nation in the heart and threatens our sense of security at home, we remember. And that's partially thanks to our next speaker, who helped oversee the design and creation of the 9/11 Memorial in New York City. I remember being so excited when I heard that this memorial was coming up, because I felt like we're doing what Americans do, and that's showing strength in the face of adversity. But I'm even more excited to introduce one of the architects behind it all, Mr. Carl Krebs.
Should we get on the...
Yeah, let's hop in the circle, why don't we? So it seems like with a building like this, and from what I heard you saying, it's one of those cases where less is actually more. You're allowing people to kind of paint their own pictures. So how do you decide as the architect what to fill in and what to leave out?
So you're absolutely right. I think our goal was to not over narrate or over orchestrate what you experience, but at the same time, you also can't be rigid. And one of the things that was interesting when we were designing the museum was we discovered about halfway through, we were actually into construction, that there was an artifact that was on one of the sites of the new towers. It was the remnant of a staircase that ultimately had to be taken down, and there was a huge roaring cry, what do? We can't destroy this. And we hadn't designed it into the museum at all. And we were asked, can we make this work? And it turned out actually that there was a real strong reason to revisit that issue. And it was because this was a staircase for the survivors. In fact, it became the survivor stair. And in those first few years after 9/11, family members were very, very much part of the process of the design. And the survivors weren't. And they said later it was a sense of maybe guilt or not feeling their story was as important as that of those who died. And it wasn't until a few years later that they began to realize that, no, they did have a story and a part of that voice. And so we were able to take this stair and bring it back in and put it in the museum, not as just something that was added, but actually as something that was part of the core and essential lesson and elements of that day.
Well, I don't think it's too much to say that I thank you, we thank you, and America thanks you for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
So this will be our last speaker before our next break, but after that we've got two more incredible ones, so you got to stick around. So if you're like me, when you hear something like creating innovative solutions to complex cybersecurity problems using computer science, your first thought is, excuse me, what? But that's exactly what our next speaker's doing. He's taking things in nature and using them to find and solve complex problems. So for instance, how do you take an ant colony and use it to revolutionize the way that we protect online information? Honestly, I still have no idea. So I'm going to let the genius behind it all tell you himself, Wake Forest's very own Aaron Fulp. So one thing that I think a lot of people in these chairs are probably thinking is, awesome, what's in it
what
for
is
me?
it? Yeah, so I think the really cool thing that you can kind of think of is any time that you've got configurations that you deal with or don't deal with, an evolutionary strategy is one of those that can kind of find it out. So think of your Facebook settings. You can actually apply this to that, or your Gmail. We're really excited about applying it to phones. The ability to have phones kind of just get better over time. I think for everybody would be much better than what we currently do now, which is, well, I hope it didn't get hacked. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much,
Absolutely.
and we're looking forward to that security.
Yep, thank you.
We all know how hard it can be growing up as a child, and we all rely on these special kind of heroes in our lives, like parents or teachers or coaches that mold us through these life-changing times. But our next speaker serves as this type of hero for every child around the world who faces any kind of discrimination. His work helps children reach their full potential in a world where we're filled with more insecurities and misfortunes than anyone could ever imagine. And because of that, it's a huge pleasure for me to introduce a real-life superhero flying all the way in from Geneva to speak with us today, Ignacio Packer.
Thanks.
So we've got an Olympics coming up, and I know a lot of us are excited about that, but your organization says that the Olympics is actually violating the rights of children.
Are you an engineer?
No.
No. Because he builds bridges. He has bridged one campaign to another of ours. And yes, we do have a campaign called Children Win. You can check it on the website, childrenwin.org. It's an exciting one, and it's around mega sporting events and how mega sporting events affect human rights, and more specifically, child rights. And with the upcoming Olympics, we are working quite a lot on this.
And so that's what we're doing to fight it, that campaign.
Yeah, and well, we work, well, I can take the same elements that we've just spoken about around evidence and values. The values are enshrined in the Child Rights Convention. And the evidence, we gather evidence, and we use views and opinions of children. We have an extraordinary film that has already won some awards of the story of a 13-year-old girl in a community in Rio, and we've filmed for 2 years. Unfortunately, also we tried to give legal support, but unfortunately how that community has been destroyed, with children being, or families being evicted from this community to let place to the business around the mega sporting events. And at the same time, we are addressing directly at the top level of FIFA and IOC with technical suggestions of how to review the bidding process, because that's where it all starts, the bidding process that decides on what city or what country would host those type of mega sporting events.
Well, I think as these events come up, we'll all be thinking about you and these children as well. Thanks, Ignacio.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Just like the events of 9/11 shook our nation to the core, what happened at Sandy Hook Elementary School reminded us that in the face of evil, we can never be too secure. Our next speaker's life was directly affected by what happened at Sandy Hook, and rather than letting it destroy her, she rose up and she founded the Sandy Hook Promise to fight so that there would be no gun violence, no gun-related deaths in the future, and to also try to ensure that no one ever has to go through what she has. Please give a warm round of applause for the brave and the inspiring Nicole Hockley.
Thank you very much.
Nicole, on behalf of everyone here, I just want to say thank you for acting when your butterfly flapped its wings, and best of luck with your hurricane. I told you guys we were going to cry. So this is it for me, everyone. I want to thank you all for being such an incredible audience. I want to thank you all for being a part of the biggest TEDx Wake Forest U in history, and I want to thank you all for making history with us here today. To wrap things up, please give a warm round of applause for Andy Chan.